Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast here on Monday. I am Mike Schaefer, and I am joined by Michael Bruntz here as we get into what Matt Rhule had to say on Monday following the Michigan State game. And we'll just dive right into it, Bruntz. There's no need to really kind of dance around any of it. Just kind of your general overview of how Matt Rhule seemed, 48 hours or so past the loss to Michigan State on Saturday.
Yeah, they kind of ran the gamut today. He kind of didn't really get into much of the officiating stuff and the one review on the touchdown catch and then the non-review on the fumble not fumble. He didn't talk about that after the game today. Got into that a little bit more and basically said that he believed that was not a touchdown. Believed that should have been a fumble on the last play, and they should have gotten another play at least to get into field goal range for Tristan Alvano. He also mentioned the review of the Gabe Ervin touchdown, no touchdown against Minnesota being another instance where, after a second look, he felt like they still got it wrong. Also touched a little bit on Minnesota or Michigan spying, I guess, or scouting, and kind of danced around that a little bit, but basically said that it happened, which, we had known based on other reporting that Connor Stallions had purchased tickets at Memorial Stadium. But they talk about that. I mean, just kind of the difference, I guess, of playing in November. I mean, that's kind of where this team was, trying to get one more win. And, the things that maybe you got away with at certain times during that 3-game win streak, all of a sudden are a little bit harder to get away with. And so we'll get into it. I mean, there's a lot to kind of run through from that game and maybe kind of what Matt Rhule thought and what we thought. But kind of some interesting comments that we'll have on the site, or already are on the site too, from Rhule today in his press conference.
Yeah, so let's just kind of walk through different topics and where it works out. Let us know what Matt Rhule kind of had to say on various things and just your general opinion on stuff. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. We'll just start right there with the Heinrich Haarberg piece of the equation. You were there at East Lansing at Spartan Stadium for the site of what felt like probably the worst game for Heinrich Haarberg this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 2 picks. He had the third that was called back. Luckily for Nebraska there, but just another, off offensive day where you I don't know. I mean, I guess it was kind of, it felt to me like a little bit of a more prolonged example maybe of what we've seen at times from this offense where they moved the ball a little bit in fits and spurts, but didn't really get enough of those big game-changing plays on offense. And they only need maybe 2 or 3 of them. And they got, the one on the Haarberg big run that set up a touchdown. But beyond that, never really found that big kind of game-changing play on offense. And I think this offense right now, they've got to be able to pick up third downs. I mean, there were some plays in that game, the Alex Bullock drop, I think, that loomed kind of large in the third quarter, and some missed opportunities that they had guys open. I think anecdotally you can say that guys have been open. Nebraska, for whatever reason, has been unable to find them, whether that's hard or whether that's not having enough time. I guess this conversation is kind of happening where people say, well, you kind of have to fit your offense to your personnel. I mean, what do you think that Nebraska's not doing now offensively that they could be doing to make this picture look different? Because I'm not sure how much more you can scheme things up from Nebraska's point of view at this point.
Yeah, I don't know that there really is. I like we on the Sunday side session with Michael Severe on Sunday. I mean, we kind of went through it. Like, this is sort of what the offense is, and you have to take the big runs from Heinrich Haarberg. I mean, the only reason that was a 1-score game was his touchdown run. Nobody else on the roster is making that touchdown run. You can give me Jeff Sims, I'll laugh at it. He's not making that run. Haarberg, is their biggest big play threat, and he is their biggest weakness all at the same time. Like, that's just the reality of what this offense is, and they have to figure out how to survive. I mean, I think the best way to put it is kind of how both you said it, how Matt Rhule said it. Like, they have to have probably 3-4 big plays in a game, and they really only had a couple. They had, the throw to Thomas Fidone was like a 27-yard pass. The 40-some yard touchdown run. And that was about it. Like they didn't have a 27-yard run in the second quarter to set things up for at least a Tristan Alvano field goal. They didn't have enough of those types of plays. And I just don't think that there's really much more you can do. They're not going to be able to line it up and run straight at teams. If teams are continue to play 8 in the box, which they're going to do. Safeties are going to come down. I mean, Michigan State safeties dictated a lot of that game, it felt like. And Nebraska just is going to have to prepare for that, especially with Wisconsin and Iowa on the schedule. So they're going to have to get their wins where they can in terms of, big plays when they present themselves. And Haarberg has to be better in individual moments. And for me, a lot of Saturday was just coming up short at key opportunities, but it didn't feel like it was a thing where this is going to plague them every week going forward. This is what they've been. Like we just saw the wrong side of the margin for them. The defense wasn't great and the special teams let them down. Was what I felt was poor coaching decisions. So when we get to that end of it, we'll dive into where they're at with the punt returning and all of that too later in the show. But I don't see any real change coming for their offense. I sure as hell don't see a quarterback change coming. Those Chubba Purdy takes are getting kind of, I wouldn't say loud, but kind of like a cricket in your backyard that you hear at night. Like that's sort of where they're at for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to see a big change there. I mean, I wouldn't hate seeing. It felt like at times against Michigan State, and also, against Illinois, and during a little bit of the Purdue game. I mean, it felt like Nebraska has found at times some runs with the running backs that have worked. I mean, they have like 27 combined carries between Emmett Johnson and Anthony Grant. I mean,
Fleeks.
Yeah, and I think Fleeks had 6, something like that. It felt like you could have done maybe a little bit more of that. I thought, right after halftime, they seemed to be moving the ball a little bit more consistently on the ground and then got away from it a little bit. But, I mean, I wrote this after the game on Saturday. I mean, Nebraska is a flawed team. I mean, I think people need to remember that. And, they were a flawed team when they won 3 straight. They're a flawed team when, you lose to Michigan State. I mean, it's the same group. And like you said, I mean, I think so much of the success the rest of the way hinges on Nebraska's ability to play complementary football. I thought the defense played well enough to win that game. I know Matt Rhule said that things felt different. It did a little bit. I think it's hard to expect your defense to go out there and just be completely dominant with some of the situations they were put in. But, I think the offense and the special teams needed to do a lot more in that game than what they did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, look, you allowed 20 points. In my mind, in college football in 2023, 20 points shouldn't necessarily be a loss if you're able to play better football. And some of those 20 points are contingent on the fact that your offense is continually putting your defense in bad spots, or your special teams is putting your defense in bad spots. So, but at the same time, we saw what it looks like if the defense doesn't just make a big play, or if the defense doesn't set your offense up, that sort of thing. So they played fine, but it feels like if they only play fine and the offense plays poor, it's going to be really hard to win a game.
Yeah, the quibble would be that, I mean, you didn't force a turnover in that game, and they had chances late. I don't know,
Tommy Hill early. I mean, if he's just slightly there, that's a pick 6 going the other way.
Yeah, Mekhi Bear on that tipped pass, it looked like he had a chance to catch that, and that would have been a huge play. But the field was tilted so far towards Nebraska's end in that game with special teams. I think at one point that they were actually even in average starting field position, and I have no idea how that was in the third quarter. I think Michigan State ended up having like an 8-yard advantage there. And when you couple that with the turnover differential, it's tough to win the way that Nebraska wants to win.
Yeah. What else do you want to get into with the offense? Do you have any thoughts on the offensive line second game for that group up front? Felt like a step back, which is interesting because it also seemed like Purdue's edges were better than what Michigan State's were, but it felt like Michigan State up front had a more consistent push throughout the game.
I felt like did it feel like they were better in the middle, like Michigan
Yeah,
State were?
interior. I mean, Justin Evans Jenkins, it felt like he had a bad game. It was more visible for him than Henry Lutovsky. It seemed like Nebraska had to do a lot to get side to side to then open things up in the middle for some of those inside zone runs.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it was Nori who was in there, and I
Yes.
mean, I thought he played okay considering the, the knee.
So that's why I didn't see Lutovsky. All right,
Yeah,
that's a good mental note for me here.
yeah. No, but I mean, you kind of need to go back and look, especially in the second half. Michigan State was doing a little bit more stunting, doing some different games up front that I think gave Nebraska some issues. But like I said, I mean, I thought in the third quarter they actually found a few runs that were working, but they got away from it. And I mean, you kind of do that when you fall behind. But yeah, I don't. I would need to go back and watch more closely to see who some of those sacks were on, because some of them it felt like Haarberg didn't have a great feel for the pocket. But certainly, I think Michigan State and their front four. I mean, I don't think it was a lot of the pressure, but I think their front four was pretty active and maybe a little bit better than maybe what I thought going in. I mean, especially like what the numbers would have suggested.
Yeah. With Haarberg, Bruns, do you think it's a case where we've seen in the past a young guy gets his first opportunity, he's able to kind of play free, loose, and then all of a sudden he keeps playing more, he gets more information thrown at him, and it's like I don't know what it looked like at the press box, but for me watching at home, it just feels like you could watch him think through his options in real time, and he's not processing information. He's just not. Like it's not even that he's not processing fast enough. He's not able to process the information as it's happening in front of him because all of a sudden he's thinking now instead of just playing and reacting like he was in the first few games.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to it. I think when Big Ten defensive coordinators have enough tape on somebody, they can figure out some schemes and some things that can really cause trouble. I mean, I think you've seen the way that opponents have used their safeties the last couple weeks. I think have given him a little bit of problem. I mean, there's been some throws where not even the deep one to Bullock, where I think he might have run the wrong route, or
He definitely ran the wrong route.
A miscommunication there. But there's just been times where he's not seeing the bracket coverage, or forcing balls over the middle, and I don't know how much you can see on the broadcast, but I mean there were a number of plays where there were options open that were maybe a little bit further into the progression that aren't being found. So I don't know. I mean, as an offensive coordinator, how do you get around that? How do you find some easier throws? I thought there were some easy throws that weren't made in that game too. But yeah, I think that's challenging. I don't know what you thought at home, but I thought that Malachi Coleman was fantastic in that game, given the opportunities. I would not have guessed that he would be as willing of a blocker as he has been.
Oh man, you needed to see him in Seacrest. This is what he did.
He's wearing guys out there.
Before he had the Nebraska offer, I'm telling you, his junior year, it was fun to watch. I mean, Lincoln East, we think of as more of a passing team with Noah Walters, but it was fun to watch his junior year because he would just crush some of these defensive backs. And Malachi's a bigger guy. I mean, he should be able to physically dominate some of these high school players he was going against, and he did. And so I never really felt like blocking was going to be more of the issue. What I like to see from Malachi is that that athleticism he has is going to be such an asset. I felt like it happened too late in the game, but I love that they finally actually just gave him a jump ball opportunity.
Yeah.
You got a guy with that kind of athleticism, like let him go one-on-one. Just, like if here's it for me. If Heinrich Haarberg is going to throw an interception, I'd rather have him do it in a jump ball scenario than him just chucking one up to the safety because he can't see the guy down the field, or he didn't realize he's going to be there. So when he has those one-on-one opportunities and they're there because the safeties are moved up and they're playing essentially, a man-to-man coverage on the outside with no help over the top, take a shot. Like I think Malachi can win some of those. I don't know that I would do it with Jaden Doss necessarily, but unless he's got a guy completely burned. Same with Jalen Lloyd. If Jalen Lloyd's running right by him, throw it. But with Malachi, let him physically go up and get the ball. He almost came down with that one opportunity that he had.
Yeah. Well, and then the other one he was interfered on pretty badly. That wasn't called.
That was you want to talk about watching something at home and you're like, okay, where's the little flag graphic that's on the score bug down there? Like when it's are they this isn't what the official is just staring at Malik. That was the entire thought process for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can imagine that, for Matt Rhule, it might have been a little bit more profanity laced or profanity laden. But yeah, let's unless you have anything else you want to add on the offense.
No, I'm good.
Okay, let's take a quick time out. When we come back, we're going to dive into defense, special teams, kind of what we saw on Saturday, some thoughts from Matt Rhule, where things are at for some players, all of that more when we return here on the Husker247 podcast. Brunts, let's start things out with some real quick injury updates. Princewell, Mielen, Matt Rhule had some interesting things to say as to why he was unavailable. It felt noticeable on Saturday because it really seems like he and Cam Lenhart really provide the pass rush. Besides, when we get the one James Williams snap where he just beats the tackle like a drum.
Yeah, no, he was in the protocol and was unable to get out of the protocol in time. So Matt Rhule said that there was a chance you see him against Maryland, which, I mean, looking ahead, I mean, this is the kind of game where you kind of need all hands on deck with the pass rusher.
This is a fun Tony White game to me.
Yeah, it's going to be you're going to have to get after the quarterback a little bit. And Cam Lenhart, I thought that was the best game that he'd played in a few. Finally looked healthy. Was able to get some things done, but it was interesting. Did you get the sense that Nebraska's defensive line was really winning up front? Because it seemed like early on, Michigan State was getting some things done, at least a little bit more than I expected. Even though you go into the numbers, I mean, Nebraska only gave up 2 yards a carry by the end of it, but I thought early on that Michigan State was a little bit more of the aggressor.
Yeah, I'm not enough of a football guy to tell you why, but it just felt like Nebraska got caught in between early in the first quarter on some of those runs. Like they just weren't, defensively, how it's felt like they've really flown to the ball, but pre-snap, they're kind of, it seems like they have a good indication as to what's coming. Felt like Michigan State had them out of sorts on that first drive. I mean, whether it was some of the play action, whether it was some of the coverage busts, it just seemed like the defense was off at the beginning, and that translated to the defensive line as well. It got better throughout the game, as it generally does, and some of that's just a credit to Robinson and Huntmacher just being complete, tough guys to handle for however many snaps as you're going to get them. But it did seem early on, Michigan State on both sides of the ball really handled Nebraska on the line of scrimmage. And that to me spoke to a little bit of Michigan State showed up on Saturday ready to try to take it to Nebraska. And I just don't think Nebraska met that intensity in the first half. And then by that point in the second half, it was kind of swimming against the current.
Yeah, no, that was a game where Nebraska kind of, and Nebraska's not built this way. They haven't been this year where they're not the ones throwing the first punch. They get into like the 7th or 8th round before they kind of start punching. It's a long warm to the fight. And then I agree though. I mean, I felt like Michigan State had Nebraska on their heels a little bit. I mean, you couple kind of what you're saying with the line play. I think whenever you're a team with an interim head coach playing in your last game at home, you probably call plays a little bit differently. You sprinkle in a few more trick plays than you would maybe normally. And I think that kind of had Nebraska on ice skates a little bit.
Yeah, well, and Rhule talked about this. You can't play with fear, and it felt like Michigan State just kind of came out with nothing to lose and played that way. And like you mentioned with the play calling, I mean, they even late, they're like, okay, we know we're running for 2 yards of carry. We're going to go at your secondary right now. This is where our best chance is. Clock be damned. Go and beat us Heinrich Haarberg if you get the ball back. And that was a gamble that ended up working out for them, even if they didn't hit on the pass, because they felt like their defense would be able to sort of hold up. So I think that I found kind of interesting. What's the status of Marques Buford, and could we see him on the field in the upcoming 3 games here to finish the year?
Buford, yeah, I think that's the plan. I mean, I think he showed enough that he was kind of back in that game. I mean, they actually went to him quite a bit. Malcolm Hartzog didn't finish the game against Michigan State. That's an injury to watch this week as things go along with the type of game that Nebraska's defense is likely going to be facing. I think Matt Rhule said he's questionable. I think he's another protocol case. But having Buford back, I think kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility safety wise. They are thin back there. I mean, with Deshaun Singleton basically being out for the year, you lose, Hartzog, or at least have him questionable for the week. I mean, those are two significant losses and not much depth back there. So he's actually coming back at the right time. He talked after the game on Saturday and said he felt okay. Was just kind of grateful to be back, I think. And like I said, I mean, it's kind of perfect timing, and he has a good understanding of the defense too. I don't think that he was, having to kind of dip a toe by any means on Saturday.
Yeah, I should have probably phrased that better because he was playing, but it's more so, is he going to be available each week?
Yeah, I think that's the plan, I think.
Yeah, because that's with that injury and that return, it's almost like you could, and with the fact that he only has 4 games before you'd lose that red shirt, I was wondering if they were going to try to manipulate that a little bit to try to ease him back. And to your mind, from what he said and what you've heard, it seems like he's going to be available as long as he feels like he can.
Yeah, no, I mean, with 4 left, they were going to use those last 4. I think for a long time they've kind of been targeting the Michigan State game as his return. So it worked out well that way. I mean, it could change. I know that when he was going through practices, and he practiced for a couple weeks before he actually played in the game, but he'd had a few setbacks in terms of just being sore after practice, and that was a concern that they had. But he said after the game he was feeling pretty good. So I would expect, I would be surprised if he wasn't out there on Saturday against Maryland.
Yep. Let's finish up with special teams here. And I've said this on a couple different platforms, on the Sunday side session, on some radio interviews. I really felt like Nebraska's punt return strategy crippled them in a way on Saturday that was a coaching error. And I'm curious how Matt Rhule has addressed that, whether he did much post game. I don't recall him doing as much post game. I know he talked about it some more on Monday. What were your sort of thoughts on what they did and with Billy Kemp, and then his remarks on Monday?
Yeah, no, he on Monday said that he took responsibility for not putting Ethan Nation out there more. I think they needed to have somebody back there that could return kicks. I mean, I don't know that they were expecting Michigan State's punter to be out kicking his coverage as much as he was, because there were.
Well, I think it was obvious to him that there was no return coming.
Right, and they finally put the 2 returners out back there, and I think that might have been the better play earlier on, because you had not only that, but you had Kemp fair catching the ball inside his own 7 twice in the second half. That hurt Nebraska.
Yeah, I'll spare people the rant that I have welling inside me on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think in some ways they kind of outthought themselves a little bit on it. And then you had Buschini, mishit a couple at the wrong time. And it's. Am I wrong that sometimes it seems like when things are kind of trending bad for Nebraska, they really go bad on special teams? It's like a bullpen that can't throw strikes.
Yeah, it's like somehow they're running out of gas at the same time that their brakes stop working, and then the steering wheel locks up, and they basically have no control of the vehicle anymore. I don't know what to make of Buschini. I mean, it's in a conference where you've got to be able to flip the field, or you got to be able to hit a 50-yard punt when there's no wind in the stadium. You were there. I know from looking at the advanced weather, there wasn't expected to be much of anything. And based on the way that all of Michigan State's specialists were kicking the ball, sure didn't seem like there was much resistance in the air. It was a very strange performance to me.
Yeah. Go back to the conversation we had about complimentary football. I mean, Nebraska's special teams have been better over that stretch of wins.
Yep.
And, they need to hold up their end, and they did not do that on Saturday. I mean, field position is so important for this team. They've been much better in average starting field position than, basically the last 2 coaching staffs at Nebraska have been. But you can't go, -3 in turnovers and then also lose the field position battle too. It's just, I know those sometimes go hand in hand, but it's a recipe to lose, especially on the road, especially in November.
Yep. Anything else you want to get to here?
Well, and it's an interesting conversation with Nation going forward because he's at 4 games. I think they're going to basically go through the week and see how Billy Kemp is, if he's able to run, and then make a decision about whether or not Ethan Nation's their punt returner or not. I think he wants to play, but I think they're hesitant to maybe burn that red shirt if they don't have to. And a lot of that just hinges on Kemp's ability to actually be able to run. And that's going to be something to follow this week, I think.
Yeah. The red shirt thing sort of has lost its luster to me in the age of the transfer portal.
Yeah.
In my mind, and Matt Rhule would be wise never to listen to me, but in my mind, I wouldn't even have that part of the equation. If you think he can help you win a game on Saturday, put him in. Don't think about it.
I think that's what he seemed to suggest that James Williams, who's also going to be playing his 4th game against Maryland, can help them win. And I think they would prefer to have him in there. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis, but I agree. I mean, I in the age of the transfer portal, I don't know how much you can count on that guy being there for the 5th year versus if he can help you for the 1st. I mean,
is there an equivalent to James Williams that you and I have covered since we've been working at Husker 24/7? Because I can't really think of another sort of guy who just can go in as a pass rusher and is just effective enough to straight whip a left tackle the way that he did. And it wasn't even like it was he didn't bull rush him.
He just ran around.
He went right by him.
Yeah.
It was like he timed the snap perfectly. Great first step. He's a long strider, which I'm sure is something you two have talked about before.
Yeah, sticks.
And he's right there. I honestly don't know that I can recall covering a pass rushing specialist in the same way.
No, not.
And I don't want to make too much of it because it's only been a few games, but it stands out to me because it's unique to what I have watched Nebraska put out there before.
Well, and also just the way for, I think, a lot of people, he came out of nowhere. That was, unique in itself. I mean, I can't think of a player that
he's what people wanted Caleb Tanner to be at that spot in those situations.
Yeah. And even from the outside, I mean, who's been Nebraska's most elite pass rusher since you and I have in the 24/7 sports era, like Randy Gregory, probably, but that's not
even close, right?
No,
you're right.
But no, I can't think of somebody whose express purpose is to just get after the quarterback and has done so. Like it's been a while.
It's kind of nice. I approve it. I'm sure that's what they've been waiting for. All right, Brunts, we shall finish things off here. Everyone check out what we have going on at Husker 24/7. Plenty more coverage, plenty more stuff. Matt Rhule talked about the Michigan sign stealing scandal. You want to dive into the dumbest storyline in all of college football. You can dive into that and what Matt Rhule's thoughts were a little bit with it. That remark sort of stood out to me when he was talking about the 3 losses that Nebraska has in conference play so far. That was, I thought that was interesting. I really did. So that we have that. We'll have plenty of coverage leading up to the Maryland game. We'll have more Husker 24/7 podcast content, Hypecast coming up. And you know what happens tonight, Brunts? Nebraska basketball tips off its season. We're in that sort of moment where you have 37 sports going on. You got the high school playoffs finishing up. We're in the November crunch time period. Can you feel it?
Yeah, it's here.
You seem enthused. It seems really like it's just the sort of thing that you look forward to in early November every year.
Yep. It's just like the mishmash of seasons. Let's get it done.
All right. Well, we'll see if Nebraska basketball can handle Lindenwood on Monday night. And we'll have that coverage for you at Husker247.com. For Michael Bruns, I'm Mike Shaver. We're Husker 24/7. We'll be back later this week with some more podcasts.